All right, what's going on, everybody? It is fight day, and I know many people are really looking forward to this fight tonight. Supposedly, this is supposed to be a big test for Canelo, another guy who moves a lot, which people have said that guys who move a lot, southpaws particularly, give Canelo Alvarez problems. So today, you may hear me say some things that you've heard me say before about this fight because I've broken down this fight a couple times on various podcasts, whether it be on the Ringside Reporter podcast that Eric Lauder and myself host every Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and also the podcast that I'm also on Thursdays with D Style, the Roundtable. So, like I said, hopefully these things that I'm going to say aren't going to sound too redundant to many of you who have been following me for a while and you watch me on various shows and you watch me regularly. But, nevertheless, let's just get started. So let's talk about the perception and, the consensus out there and some of the things that we've been hearing about this fight and about both fighters. Statement number one, Billy Joe Saunders has a style that will present Canelo Alvarez problems. History has shown us that people with Billy Joe Saunders' style have given Canelo Alvarez in the past. I tend to disagree with this statement because having problems with a style or having certain problems or issues in a fight doesn't mean that you're necessarily losing the fight or you're necessarily being dominated in the fight, because all fighters are going to come across rough patches and tough situations as they navigate through their careers and the level of their opposition increases. So in those very same fights that people said Canelo Alvarez had problems, well, his opponents also had problems with him. It's called a competitive fight, which you're going to run into in your career as a fighter as the opposition increases. So that's part of the course. So let's take a look at some of these fights in question, and we'll compare them and see and compare and contrast how these fighters, style-wise, can, how it could be looked at from Billy Joe Saunders' standpoint, in other words. So people are talking about, they look at Erislandy Lara and they look at Austin Trout, and they're going to look at the both Golovkin fights, but primarily they're going to look at Erislandy Lara and Austin Trout. The Floyd Mayweather fight we need not look into because Floyd Mayweather dominated that fight, and there really isn't any other fighter that fights like Floyd Mayweather that you can compare to. But the two close fights with Austin Trout and Erislandy Lara, let's look at both of those styles, and we'll compare and contrast them with Billy Joe Saunders' styles, because people are telling me that there are similarities, and I think there really isn't. There really isn't similarities between Austin Trout and Billy Joe Saunders and Erislandy Lara and Billy Joe Saunders. So let's talk about Austin Trout. Austin Trout's a slick southpaw. He moves in and out, sort of like an ambush. That's a similarity that you may be able to kind of attach to Billy Joe Saunders, because Billy Joe Saunders is an ambush in and out type fighter. Austin Trout is as well. But the big difference with Austin Trout compared to Billy Joe Saunders is his volume. In that Canelo Alvarez fight, I'm not a big punch stat guy, but sometimes when I do look at the punch stat numbers at the end of a fight, to me, I can kind of see, maybe that, in this instance, they're right. They're not right all the time, but sometimes I take a look at their numbers. I'm like, yeah, I could see that. This was a fight that I said to myself, yeah, I could see how those numbers would, they kind of seem somewhat accurate to me. So in the Alaverz fight, Austin Trout threw like 760 punches. The shitload of punches when you're fighting a guy like Canelo Alaverz, who's a power puncher and he's a counter puncher himself. Usually when you fight a counter puncher, your output goes down. Austin Trout threw a shitload of punches that fight. He was moving in and out, okay? But I don't think it was necessarily the movement that predominantly gave Alaverz trouble in that fight. I think it was the volume, because Austin Trout fought a very fast-paced fight in that matchup. But the thing was he was getting rocked. He got knocked down. He got stunned a few times. And Canelo's power was able to negate that activity in spots. Not totally, but in spots, it was able to negate that activity, right? And it was able to, score Canelo some points in that fight. So the argument could have been made, well, Austin Trout's landing more, but maybe Canelo's landing the harder, more telling blows. I had the fight a draw. A lot of people had it, close. It could have gone either way in a lot of people's opinions. I thought it was a razor close fight. I don't have a problem with Alaverz getting the decision in that fight. You swing one round here or there. Alaverz could have got the decision in that fight. I don't have a problem with it. I had the fight a draw. I thought it was razor close. But the big difference in that fight, I thought, was the volume, and just how Austin Trout has very quick hands. He has very quick hands, and he throws a lot of touch jabs. And he throws a lot of punches just with the intent of scoring. When you're not sitting down and really trying to take a guy's head off, you're able to throw combinations fast and get out. So Austin Trout throws those little touch punches, those little flurries. Okay, he throws those flurries and he gets out of there. Billy Joe Saunders doesn't throw flurries. He throws one or two punches at a time and then he jets back out. So the big difference when you want to make a comparison and say, well, guys like that move a lot give Canelo Alaverz problems. No, it's more than that. It wasn't the movement predominantly in that fight that gave Alaverz problems. It was the activity and the fast pace of the fight. Okay? I'm not saying the movement was nothing. It had no effect in that fight. But I thought when you watch how many jabs Trout was throwing in that fight, and he was throwing he was like like 2, 3, 4, 5 jabs at a time. Just he didn't care whether he hit Alaverz in the head. He was touching him everywhere with the jab, and he was varying up the speed, and he was throwing the jab to the body. He was throwing a shit ton of jabs. Billy Joe Saunders doesn't throw a lot of jabs like that. He doesn't throw the volume like that. So that's the big difference. So you can move all you want, but if you're not going to throw punches, you're not going to score points. And Austin Trout did move, but again, I'm going to say the same thing about Austin Trout's movement that I'm going to say about Lara's movement. Watch the feet. Austin Trout's front foot was never more than 3 feet away from Alaverez's front foot. So he moved subtly and just enough to try to get himself out of range, but not too far out of range where he wouldn't be able to reset faster and transition back into his offense quickly. Okay? So that was a big advantage in that fight. Now let's talk about the Lara fight. Oh, well, Canelo didn't cut off the ring in that fight. He most absolutely certainly did cut off the ring in that fight, because look how many body punches he was able to land there. Now, the big problem for Alaverz in that fight, partly the jab was, but the big part was not only Erislandy Lara's foot movement. It was his upper body movement, the way he moved his head, the way he dipped and ducked and bends at the waist. He not only is elusive by making subtle steps off to the side and sliding back, he brings another dimension, not only with his feet, but with his upper body movement. Once again, Billy Joe Saunders does not have that upper body movement like Erislandy Lara. And also Erislandy Lara has some pop. He got Canelo's attention a few times in that fight with his jab because he's a little bit explosive. He carries a little bit of power, particularly in that left hand, with that left hand. But what made that fight competitive was the fact that Alaverz was able to cut the ring off, but he just couldn't hit Lara in the head because Lara kept slipping and he kept dipping and ducking and he kept twisting his hips and turning away from shots. So in that instance, while the head and shoulders are moving, the mid-torso is not. And I don't think Alaverz landed all those body shots. Some of them went around Lara's back. Some of them hit him on the hip. But he did land a good amount of them, which made the fight competitive. I had that fight for Lara, 115 and 113. I thought the 12th and the 5th round were swing rounds. I gave the 5th to Lara. I gave the 12th to Alaverz. If I give the both swing rounds to Alaverz, I would have had the fight a draw. And what made that fight close was Alaverz was cutting off the ring. His pressure and his aggressiveness was effective. Okay. And his body shots told the story there. Billy Joe Saunders does not throw a lot of body shots. Okay. Billy Joe Saunders does not move well and a lot with his head and upper body movement. Doesn't bend a lot of and dip and duck at the waist. So that's a big difference there. And once again, Erislandy Lara, his front foot was never 3 feet away from Canelo Alvarez's front foot. So there's a big difference there. So Billy Joe Saunders does not have Austin Trout's volume and activity, and he doesn't have Erislandy Lara's upper body movement and head movement. And I'm going to make another bold statement. I don't think he's faster. I think both of those men I just mentioned, Trout and Lara, are faster than Billy Joe Saunders. Okay? So I don't think that this version of Billy Joe Saunders is you can compare him with Trout because of the volume and the activity, and Erislandy Lara because of the pop that Erislandy Lara has, particularly in that left hand, and even with his jab, he can get your attention. He busted up Alaverez's eye a little bit in that fight. He was snapping his head back a little bit. I'm not going to say Alaverz was ever staggered or buckled in that fight, but he was stunned a few times in that fight. You could see him how he was frozen in his tracks after getting hit with that jab a few times. So Billy Joe Saunders does not have those two attributes, and I don't even think. I think Erislandy Lara is a much. People talk about how great Floyd Mayweather is, and he is. He's the best fighter that obviously Alvarez fought. But in my opinion, Lara is arguably possibly the second best fighter, technically and skill-wise, that Alvarez fought, in my opinion. So this is the thing. I think Alvarez is a better fighter than Billy Joe Saunders. I mean, Erislandy Lara is a better fighter than Billy Joe Saunders. So that fight with Alvarez was razor close. I had Erislandy Lara winning it, but it was close enough and competitive enough where obviously a lot of people did give that to Alvarez. But I think Erislandy Lara, not only Alvarez is a better fighter than Billy Joe Saunders, I think Erislandy Lara is a better fighter than Billy Joe Saunders. So you want to talk about resumes and what fighters have done. When you look at Billy Joe Saunders, he struggled with Andy Lee. He struggled with Chris Eubank Jr. He went life and death with those guys. And another thing about Billy Joe Saunders, he loses the majority of his rounds in the second half of the fight. He slows down in the second half of the fight. And that's the best opportunity to get Alvarez, because he's been criticized for slowing down in the second half of the fight. I think he's kind of improved on that. But, Billy Joe Saunders slows down in the second half of the fight. So if he doesn't get them early rounds in the bank, then he's in trouble. He's in trouble. So that's the thing. And you want to talk about, everyone's talking about movement. Movement isn't always good if it's not effective, if it doesn't have a purpose. You could move all you want. Look at Paulie Malignaggi, guys like Paulie Malignaggi, guys like Amir Khan, guys like Andre Durrell. These guys used to move a lot. They used to stay way outside and hang around the outer edges of the ring, right along the ropes, right? And they used to just circle the ring. But they were so far out of range that there were no threat to land punches, when they're in that defensive posture. The fighters who are the most dangerous are the ones who are, when they're in a defensive posture, they could transition very quickly back into an offensive posture and, catch their opponent off guard, or by either counter punching or just resetting fast enough where their opponent can't anticipate it. So when you get a guy like Billy Joe Saunders, who's going to be moving a lot, but he's going to be, instead of being 3 feet away, he's going to be 10 feet away. And then he's got to cover all that extra ground just to get back into punching range. And then when he does get back into punching range, he's only going to throw 1 or 2 punches at a time. Then that movement does not serve him. So just the fact that he's going to move a lot doesn't matter. If he's not going to make Alaverz miss and make him pay, then he's in trouble. And if he's not going to throw a lot of punches, or if he's not going to bring a lot of activity, then he's going to be the one that's going to be on the short end of the stick with the judges. Everyone's talking about how the judges are just going to give it to Alaverz. Well, they're not going to give it to Saunders if he's not throwing punches. They're not going to give it to Saunders if he's just going to be 10 feet away from him the whole fight and circling him and then throwing 1 or 2 jabs at a time. They're not going to give him the fight. In Saunders' best performance against David Lemieux, which is the last fight I thought he looked good in, I don't even think he has not looked overly impressive or stellar. I mean, even with Willie Monroe Jr., he struggled and he lost 2 of the last 3 rounds in that fight. And I had that fight close. I had that fight 115 and 113 for Saunders. And then you look at what Golovkin did to Willie Monroe, and then you look at what Saunders did to Willie Monroe, and you ask yourself, what's going on here? Saunders hasn't looked good to me since the Lemieux fight. And, he fought Martin Murray, but that was a very uninspiring performance as well. His legs have looked like they've slowed down a bit. He doesn't have the pop in his punches. He's not as slick as everyone says. Again, just because you move a lot, it doesn't mean your movement is effective. Everyone has this perception. They have they attach these connotations, whether they be negative or positive. When they say a guy is flat-footed, automatically that means that he's not a good boxer. He doesn't have good movement, right? Julio Cesar Chavez was an excellent boxer. He had great foot positioning, great balance. He knew how to cut off the ring. He had great instincts in there, okay? He was an outstanding inside fighter, but he wasn't a guy that fought on his toes. Just because you don't fight on your toes doesn't mean you're a bad fighter. Doesn't mean you're not a skilled fighter. Marvin Hagler, arguably the greatest middleweight of all time, he did not fight on his toes. He was a flat-footed fighter. That doesn't mean he wasn't a great fighter. Roberto Duran, another guy who was a stalker, but he had great footwork. He had great footwork because he could take make a little foot feints, make a little step one way and go the other way. He was always on balance. He never overextended, had his elbow over past his knees. These guys had balance. These guys know how to pivot out. They know how to step around, keep their feet positioned properly to create punching angles for themselves. That's good boxing too. Just because you're not a guy that fights on your toes and boxes from the outside and sticks and moves, you don't have a pretty style. The whole flat-footed thing, and then when a guy moves a lot, automatically he's a stick and move guy. He's a boxer. Like his style is looked more favorably than another guy who's more of a stalker inside type fighter. So we got to learn how to look at these things, and we love to put labels on things, and we like to have, like I said, these positive and negative connotations to certain words. But just because you move, like Paulie Malignaggi, he was a guy who moved a lot, but how many punches did he throw? Did he sit down on his shots? I'm not saying he was a bad fighter, but his style didn't work against a lot of other styles. It didn't. He was another guy that did not bring a lot of volume. He was another guy that just primarily threw jabs. There's a lot of times when Billy Joe Saunders will just throw jabs and he won't follow up with anything else. You're not going to win the fight that way. You're not going to win the fight that way. Just not going to happen. And then going back to that Lemieux performance, he only, again, I'm going to use his punch stats there, but once again, I know I've bashed punch stats over the years, and you guys can call me out, Beeb, all of a sudden you're using punch stats now, you're a hypocrite. But like I said, sometimes I look at those punch stats, and to me, I'm like, okay, maybe they got it right this time. This seems like an accurate description of what I saw as well. He only threw 465 punches in that fight. There's no way he's going to only be able to throw 465 punches in this fight and win this fight unless a significant amount of those punches hurt Canelo, which is highly unlikely. You got to give Canelo credit. Even in that Golovkin fight, both Golovkin fights, he took some heavy shots that probably would have knocked down other fighters, maybe hurt them enough to knock them down. Okay? But he took them shots. Billy Joe Saunders does not have the volume, does not have the upper body movement, does not have the power. I mean, Billy Joe Saunders is nowhere near Canelo's toughest fight. I mean, you look at those Golovkin fights, you look at the Lara fight, you look at the Trout fight, obviously the Mayweather fight, which he really learned how to adapt in that fight. When people say, yeah, you're saying he got better, but it's not really he got better. It's because he fought guys that weren't good. Jacobs is an outstanding fighter. Look how much trouble Jacobs gave Golovkin. I thought Jacobs beat Golovkin. And look how Canelo made him shell up in that fight. Wish I had that fight close too. That was a 115, 113 fight. You could even argue possibly that fight could have been a draw. But it was, all three judges scored at 115, 113 for Alaverz. But when people say, they try to downplay, Alaverz really didn't get better. It's just that his opposition really fought guys at the right time. Fought guys that were overrated, whatever. But he made adjustments. The adjustments he's made is he doesn't chase guys around the ring anymore. He's learned how to be a little slick himself, set traps. He'll etch forward a little bit and force his opponent to back up, and then he'll stop. And then he'll throw a feint and freeze the guy, and then he'll jump in. His biggest weakness has been his foot speed. So how has he corrected that? Or how has he improved upon that? Well, timing, feints, experience, anticipating how fighters move, and not only following a guy, around the ring, but anticipating and picking up on a guy's movement and beating him to the spot before he gets there. That's all experience. That's timing. That's processing things mentally. That's not only muscle memory, but that's reflexes in the brain developing memory patterns as well. Okay? That all comes with experience. And the reason why he was able to deal with that Lara fight so well was because he didn't chase Lara around the ring. He didn't chase him around the ring. He did cut off the ring. But Lara is so slick with his upper body and head movement, that's where the challenges came into play. So what did Alaverz do? He made a concerted effort to say, I'm not landing my headshots here. I'm going to commit to the body, which is something he did not do in the Mayweather fight. He headhunted in the Mayweather fight. He followed Mayweather around. Instead of being patient and let the fight unfold, he was a little anxious and overzealous, and he forced the fight. Everyone's like, oh, well, he's not going to be able to cut off the ring against Billy Joe Saunders, and he's going to just chase him around. No, he's not going to chase him around the ring. He's not going to chase him around the ring because he's become more patient. He's become more crafty. He's developing his own types of nuances to his game with, like I said, the feints, the anticipation of movement, cutting off the ring by beating guys to the spot, picking up on how they're fighting, and studying and collecting data as the fight goes on and applying that data later in the fight. These are things he never did before. Opening up shots, moving his jab around a little bit, jabbing to the body. When he was young, he never used to jab to the body. He jabs to the body a lot now. He jabs to the body a lot now. Throws a lot more feints. His timing has gotten so much better. He moves his head so much more. He's even picked up some of those Mayweather moves. He's even said that he's gone back and even Mayweather says, yeah, some of the things that I used to do, he's doing right now. So there's been an immense amount of improvement here. Billy Joe Saunders has not gotten better. He's declined. All right. So this whole thing about the movement and this to that and the third, Billy Joe Saunders is not a slick fighter. He's just a guy that moves a lot. Just because you move a lot doesn't mean you're slick. Okay. Paulie Malignaggi wasn't the slickest guy in the world. He got hit a lot. Ricky Hatton was thought to be that come forward guy. And he was getting to Paulie Malignaggi. He hit him a lot. So this whole thing, all of a sudden, people are like looking at Billy Joe Saunders like he's Pernell Whitaker or something. Nah, come on, man. This is not going to be a tough fight tonight. This is going to be a extremely, extremely, extremely one-sided fight, which I think Alaverz will win handily. I do not even think this fight will be remotely close. Remotely close. That's right. I said it. Remotely close. Just like the Callum Smith fight was going to be close. I even think Callum Smith's a better fighter than Billy Joe Saunders. And this is no disrespect. This is just realness. And you saw what Canelo did to Callum Smith. Okay, Beeb. Everyone's in the chat and watching this video right now saying, Beeb, all right, shut the fuck up. You've already said these things. We know, we get the point. So how the fuck do we bet this fight tonight? Very simple. I don't want to lay 700 on Alaverz. You know that. I don't even want to lay $1 on Saunders because I don't think he's got a snowball's chance in hell of winning. Fuck the judges. He's just going to lose, and he's going to lose clearly and cleanly. So how do you bet this fight? A lot of people are saying take the over. A lot of people are saying, well, just bet the fight to go the distance. Nah, you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say this. Bet Canelo at a plus 150 to win by decision. I think the fight goes the distance. I think Canelo wins in a very one-sided fight. I know people are thinking because he's mad. They're saying, oh, he's going to go out there and knock him out because he's angry, blah, blah, blah. But Billy Joe Saunders is not going to engage. He's going to try to engage a little bit in the first half of this fight. Once he gets hit with a few shots, he's going to get hurt. And he's going to go into defense mode. He's going to go into survival mode. And he is experienced and crafty enough. And he does have a pretty decent chin where I think that he'll survive here. He'll survive because I think, all this talk about, oh, well, I'm coming to win. I'm not just coming to survive or get a paycheck. With all due respect, you may be thinking that right now, but once you start getting hit with a few shots, we all have what's called survival instincts. We touch that hot stove. What do? We get burnt. What does our brain tell us? Let's not touch that hot stove again. So he's going to get hit a few times, and then he's going to say to himself, you know what? I'm going to go back to what I know, and that's move, 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 move. And then when I can't move anymore, I'm going to grab. So this could turn into a stinker, guys. I'm just forewarning you right now. This could turn into a stinker. You know, there's a reason why he asked for the 22-foot ring. There's a reason why. There's a reason why. A lot of it is mind games, but let's be honest. He is going to try to stay as far away from Alaverz as possible. He does not want to fight this fight on the inside, not even a little bit. Not even a little bit. You're going to see a lot of holding in this fight. You're even going to probably see him pulling down on Alaverez's head. You're even going to see him probably in the clinch, maybe hit him with some rabbit shit. He's going to do everything he can to try to rattle and frustrate Alaverz. But when that stuff doesn't work and he starts running out of ideas and he starts getting hurt a little bit here, what's he going to do? What's he going to do? He's going to go into survival mode. So I think this fight goes the distance. My thing here, take the plus 150 for Canelo Alaverz to win this fight by decision. That's the pick I'm recommending here, guys. Take the decision prop of Canelo Alaverz. Because once again, Alaverz is not going to chase this guy around the ring. Okay? And Billy Joe Saunders is not going to engage. He's not going to throw a lot of punches. So unfortunately, as much as I don't want this to play out this way, and I hope I'm wrong, I think this fight could possibly be the same fight, very similar, than that Callum Smith fight was. And you're just going to see a uneventful, unanimous decision. I find myself at the end of this fight possibly having a 117 to 111 or 118 to 110 scorecard when I'm adding up my points at the end of the night. That's what I'm anticipating. There is going to be no controversy here. There is going to be no controversy here. This is going to be an extremely one-sided fight on Canelo Alaverez's favor. So, beating the odds with Beeb, taking Canelo Alaverz by unanimous decision with the plus 150. So keep in mind, guys, this could be if it's a technical decision, a unanimous decision, or a split decision. You win this fight with the plus 150. So if they butt heads in the 9th round and they go to the scorecards and it ends up being a technical decision and Alaverz wins the decision, you win the fight. You win the fight. Alaverz just has to win this fight by any form of decision, and you win this fight. And you take your plus 150. And you take this plus 150. So that's just my opinion here, guys. I think that's the best bet. That's the best bet here. Ralph, I hope that you're right. I hope that you're right. But guess what? My gut tells me you're not going to be right. My gut tells me you're not going to be right. Billy Joe Saunders will not engage. He's not going to want to engage. He's going to try every little dirty trick in the book. And I'm not saying he's a dirty fighter. He's going to try to, do every little irritating thing he can. He's going to push the envelope as far as he can to try to frustrate Alaverz, hoping that Alaverz is going to get aggravated and maybe be a little bit fight out of his fight out of his character a little bit, and be maybe lunge in with shots or be off balance. He's going to try and draw Alaverz into a ugly, sloppy fight. But I don't think Alvarez is going to fall for it. And once he realizes that's not going to work, then he's going to go into survival mode. Once he starts getting hit with those body shots, he starts getting hurt. He's going to go into survival mode. So that's how I see this fight playing out. Yeah. You could back the British fighter if you want. That's fine, but I'd rather use my brain than my heart. You know, when you say it will be eventful, it could have some drama to it. But let's just hope it's not negative drama. So, all right, guys, that's the pick. Plus 150. Canelo Alvarez by unanimous decision. Enjoy the fight tonight. Being the odds of Beeb is out. Talk to y'all soon. And make sure you check us out tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, myself and Erislandy Lara, as we recap this fight. And hope to hear from you and hope you join us tomorrow night. Stay safe. Enjoy the fights, guys. Peace out, everybody. Take care.